The country is heading into a dangerous new phase. More than 40,000 Americans are in the hospital tonight with COVID, including record numbers here in Tennessee.
The late Washington Post co-owner Philip Graham popularized the statement that news is the first rough draft of history. But in these social media-driven times, the scholarly Columbia Journalism Review may be more accurate when it writes journalism is now the second draft of history. Either way, America's fourth estate has certainly had its hands full covering the rapidly evolving history of the 2020 election. And perhaps with this issue of race being front and center in this year's campaigns, has the job of reporting, writing, analyzing, and teaching been even more challenging for journalists of color? I'll ask 6 of my most seasoned and scholarly colleagues. My guest, Vickie Thomas, City Beat reporter for WWJ News Radio 950, CHASTITY PRATT, Education Bureau Chief, Wall Street Journal, Mark S. Lee, host of Inside the Conference Room with Mark S. Lee on 910 AM Superstation. From Washington, D.C., Richard Prince, editor-writer, Richard Prince's Journalisms. From Baltimore, E.R. Shipp, associate professor and journalist in residence, Morgan State University. And from back here in Detroit, ALICIA Nails, professor and director, Journalism Institute for Media Diversity at Wayne State University. I'm Chuck Stokes. Come with us for our final installment of our Spotlight on the News series, Inside Michigan's African American Vote. Is President Trump the best president for African Americans since Abraham Lincoln? Yes or no?
No.
All right. E.R. Shipp, once you stop laughing.
It's so hard to not laugh. He is absolutely no.
The facts do not bear that out.
I can't go for that.
Can't go for that.
No can do.
No can do?
No can do.
Nope.
No.
Keeping my journalistic hat on, Chuck, I would have to say African Americans don't think so.
If you're African American and you don't vote for Joe Biden on election day, are you really black? ALICIA Nails?
Wow.
No.
Yes, you are black. And you are American, by the way.
I don't think your vote changes your race. So if you're black before it started, I'd still be black.
Yeah, you're still black. We got all kinds under our umbrella.
Yes, you're still black.
Yes, you would still be black.
What, in your opinion, have been the major issues shaping this race that when people go in to vote, if they haven't already voted, do you think from an African American's perspective are going to be the crucial issues?
I remember interviewing a woman who cast her ballot at the Northwest Activity Center, and she was in her mid-70s, and she was in tears, basically, because of, number one, the pandemic, and I think a lot of us are isolated because of the pandemic, not doing the things that we normally do, but more so, I think that she felt that we were turning the clock back on all the gains that had been made in the civil rights movement. So race will be an issue.
African Americans and African American journalists particularly want to be taken seriously. They want the issues to be taken seriously. And I think we've seen a lot more of that since the George Floyd case. But that's the main thing. Don't brush us off. Don't relegate us to the back rows in our issues. Take them seriously. Put them on the front page. Believe us when we tell you things. Believe the community when they tell you things. And all that translates. Actually, now that you mentioned it, all that translates to the political sphere as well. We want to be taken seriously by the Democrats and the Republicans.
With students, I'm seeing that they're concerned. The action in the streets over the summer got everyone's attention, but I don't think young people really are making that connection between the issues that propel them to take to the streets over the summer with voting. So part of what we old folks have been doing is trying to help explain that connection. Why is it so difficult to get a ballot? Why is it so difficult to be able to vote in person? While we're trying to encourage them to vote, while also trying to explain to them that this is a very messy system.
Professor Alicia Nails, your thoughts about this?
The hypocrisy. The students cannot understand how the United States of America is willing to accept things from a white male they would never have accepted from a black male, and they want to write about that kind of thing. So I teach a class that's kind of uber objective, neutral reporting, and they are unimpressed with that call. They want to know, how is it that a man who does not pay his taxes, how is it that a woman who is not up to Michelle Obama's level, how is it that that's okay with America? If that doesn't resonate with you on some level and you're able to excuse all of that and go with Trump, the students don't understand that from a just a race-based level.
Chastity Pratt, you're the bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal in terms of education. You know that subject to and through. Has education received the attention on this campaign trail that it deserves, given the impact that it has on all of our lives?
What we've seen is there are some stories that absolutely everybody's paying attention to. Is my school going to open? Is my school going to close? You know, what's going to happen with, you know, kids getting into college? And so those type of stories have broken through a lot. But just on the campaign, those types of education stories haven't been top of the fold, haven't been, you know, top of mind, because if it's not related to the pandemic directly or race directly, you know, that nothing else really matters right now. So what we've seen is each camp, they're talking about, okay, so what would happen would I close down the economy and essentially close down schools? And then there's the discussion about school, college, you know, debt. Would I forgive the $1.5 trillion in debt? Biden, of course, says that he wants to do that, at least a big chunk of it. And then you have President Trump saying, no way, that socialism will cost us too much. Education really hasn't broken through in this campaign because people are more concerned about their own safety and health.
Marquez Lee, a few years back, a gentleman named Bill Clinton won the presidency on a very short phrase: "Is the economy stupid?" Is it still about the economy?
From a pocketbook standpoint, let me just cut to the chase, Chuck. The bottom line is, from a business standpoint, it's been devastating to the African-American small business owner specifically. And here's nationally, 41% of African-American businesses are shut down. There are 1.1 million African-American businesses. So think about that, 41% have shut down compared to 17% nationally. Mm-hmm. And when you look at, in the state of Michigan specifically, 1 out of 7 businesses in general are not confident. So this is a pocketbook issue. You're talking about the city of Detroit, for example, where we have 62,000 small businesses, nearly 150,000 of them, 150,000 jobs created. That is a significant economic impact. So people are going to go to the polls with the economy as top notch as well, along with COVID-19.
Yeah.
And Chuck, on that issue, we launched. It was my idea to launch a feature called Black Business Minute, and I've been talking to Black-owned businesses since we launched August the 10th, and a lot of them are struggling. One of the statistics that I saw said that 50% of Black-owned businesses won't survive this pandemic. That's a lot.
Fake news. We just saw the other evening President Trump storm out of an interview on 60 Minutes with Leslie Stahl. As professional journalists and communicators, how concerned should we be about the impact of those 2 words on our profession?
I don't even accept the term. Right. I understand why it's used, but as a professional, I reject the notion that you have fake news. News that's produced professionally has been vetted, and we know how that works. But fake news is just a phrase used to distract the public from what they ought to be focusing on, which is facts, truth. When the truth and the facts are inconvenient to certain political leaders, they will try to denounce it by saying that we are the enemies of the people. Those of us who are bringing this information are enemies of the people. It's an old tactic. Mm-hmm. And I think as professionals, we have to do more to educate people. Media literacy is a big issue. I think we need to focus on it more and not just accept the fact that people understand what they're seeing, that they understand the difference between ads and news, between opinion and news. That it still remains that is the best, we are the best watchdogs for this democracy that we have.
I think it's important too that people continue to rely on credible sources, number one. Number two, it's important that people do their research. Don't just take every piece of information that you got as the gospel, so to speak. It's incumbent upon all people to do their research, understand the information that's being presented, and then obviously make your own determination. But I agree wholeheartedly. I don't buy that notion of fake news.
And I think you have to beware of a term that was entered into the lexicon by a man who the New York Times has documented thousands of lies. Accuse the enemy of that which you are guilty.
It's not just about quote unquote fake news. It's about undermining of institutions. And you can see this most clearly overseas, where dictators and autocrats in many Black countries, as well as other countries, are using that term, fake news, to harass and imprison members of the news media. And if what a lot of people are theorizing is to be believed, then that's the direction in which Donald Trump and his followers want to take us in this country. It's part of, you undermine the press, you undermine the Justice Department, you undermine all the institutions that are set up as safeguards in our democracy, and then you're heading right to an autocracy.
I agree with Professor Shipp. Media literacy is really important. I was teaching a class this summer at Harvard, and I had to help the young people to understand no matter where you get your, quote, news from, you always have to check the source. This is freedom of the press. You attack the press, you're attacking the Constitution. That's, it's just part of who we are as a democracy. And so that conversation needs to come to the fore. And also, it is dangerous. Obviously, it's dangerous to attack the press and call us this term that, like Professor Shipp, I don't even use, because right now our industry is contracting. And for someone to attack us when we're becoming, in some ways weaker because we're less of us, that's dangerous. So we need to get ahead of it.
President Obama, I think, for lack of better words, just unloaded over the last few days on President Trump. I cannot remember a past president talking about a sitting president in the way that he did. Obviously, 4 years of pent-up frustration, but he tackled just about everything that he's probably wanted to say during the presidency of President Trump. Professor Shipp, you're dealing with all these things, I'm sure, and getting these questions from students at your historically Black college and university.
So many people miss having had anyone seem to be presidential for the last 4 years, that they're grateful to be able to see someone string words together to make sense in a sentence and to engage them on real ideas. It is, though, tricky business for a former president to attack a sitting president. We've never had that before. At least I don't think we've had that before. But on the issues themselves, I think Obama is serving a great role in that he can articulate, and that's the key word, better than Biden, many ideas. And one of them is what is going on in the country in terms of efforts to suppress the vote among African Americans. He can probably speak well to those more intelligent voters out there who are troubled by what they've seen during the Trump years, but are still kind of sitting on the fence. I think he might be able to speak to them.
Mm-hmm. Richard Prince, you and I have sat through numerous State Department seminars for journalists with high-ranking diplomats. Foreign affairs doesn't seem to have really caught on through this particular election.
It is an issue in, sort of a circuitous way in the immigration issue. A lot of African Americans see competition from immigrants as an issue, and so therefore they're listening up to what Trump is saying about that. That's sort of under the surface. It's another case of everything being interconnected. You all remember at the beginning of this virus how a lot of Black people were saying, "Oh, Black people can't get this."
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
And that's another case of institutions being undermined. And then you can ask Herman Cain, how true that is. So we need to. One of the criticisms I've heard of the news media recently is the failure to connect dots, and that is true in both this case of immigration and foreign affairs, and the virus and quote unquote fake news.
The reason they pulled Barack Obama out the week before the election, hoping that he could energize all those people, all those African Americans who came out to vote for him in 2008 in record numbers. I don't know. We'll see. I heard a radio ad the other day here in Metro Detroit said something like, if your vote didn't count, why would they be trying to take it away from you? And so there are some really pointed efforts to get the vote out in the Black community.
I'm not sure it'll be at the same level that when President Obama was running, but I certainly think you're going to see an increase in number of African Americans coming out to the polls. And I saw some recent data points earlier in the city of Detroit, for example, absentee ballots are up significantly in the city of Detroit. So I think we're going to see an increase. To what extent, we don't know just yet.
I want to go back to Richard's point. We heard about the robocalls to Detroiters, discouraging them from, sending in those ballots, saying that if they do, you'll be tracked by the police. They can use it to track this and track that. And certainly we saw the Attorney General step in and charge those that were responsible for making those robocalls to discourage voters. So there's a lot going on this election. And I think Richard is right, too, that we aren't necessarily doing a good enough job of connecting all the dots.
Professor Alicia Nels, what do you see for young students now? Are they still enthusiastic about going into this business of journalism with all that they're seeing going on and all this partisanship? Or are they just like, that's the last profession I want to go into?
Well, the same kind of energy that had youth out on the streets in ways that I couldn't foresee 10, 15 years ago has got them wanting to they have entrepreneurial ways, be it podcasts, be it their own production companies. They want their voices out there. Sometimes it's more multimedia than it is print-based, but that's okay. It's getting their voices out there and the voices of that has artistic forms as well. So yeah, they want to be journalists. They're changing the face of what journalism is.
It's definitely not the old newspaper magazine track that we were accustomed to when we were in journalism school, but they are interested in podcasts. They are interested in using video to communicate. But what I'm also seeing is that they're interested in working for themselves. They all want to be their own person. So they're not as excited about applying for internships, unfortunately, and thinking of going the traditional route.
As African-American journalists or journalists who happen to be African-American, has it been particularly challenging to sort of separate your professional hat from when you go home and you look in the mirror?
I've been Black as long as I've been a journalist, so it's not changed how we do the job. It's just a new era where race is, closer to the forefront in every person's mind than it was, when I got into this, 25 years ago.
When the protesters clashed with the police over near City Airport, and it was just really ugly, and that just lingered with me for a while, but it still does not affect the way that I do my job. I mean, as journalists, we're trained to be objective. We're trained to get both sides of the story. But I mean, I would be lying if I didn't say I haven't been affected by what's been going on, the deaths that we've experienced from the pandemic in Detroit, people that I've known that have died. I've cried, when certain people have lost loved ones, and thank God I haven't lost anybody in my family. But I just grieve for those who've lost people to this virus that some people say that will just poof, disappear.
I know we're all members of the National Association of Black Journalists, but Richard, you wear a lot of other hats. You're in the Trotter Group and other organizations. Has belonging to those types of organizations been a big help when you're facing these type of very thorny issues and difficult times?
Yes. And the most important thing that those groups have taught us is that the meaning of the word professional is under it's viewed differently by different folks. Wes Lowry, for example, who used to be at the Washington Post, now with CBS, wrote a big piece in the New York Times about the meaning of the word objectivity. It depends on who's looking at it, what's objective. What those groups have also taught us is that being Black and being a journalist are not two different things. The response that you have to seeing Black people being victimized or having other things happen to them can be used in your professional life to drive those issues to the forefront. That's why we're there in the first place, to use everything we have to enhance our profession and make it more representative of the population.
Final word is very simple. We're all human. But yes, I think we're all affected to a certain extent by what's going on in this country, but we have a job to do. And I would ask everyone to make sure that you do your homework and go out and vote, period. Please go out and vote.
Amen.
Yes.
That's one thing we all agree on. If you haven't voted, make sure that you get out and vote on Election Day. Very distinguished panel. Thank you so much. Panel of Neiman Fellows and Pulitzer Prize winner and Ida B. Wells winner and Emmy winners. Thank you so much, and stay safe, all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you.
And finally, this close to Election Day, perhaps we should all remember the words delivered in 1968 in Grand Rapids, Michigan by Gerald R. Ford, the only person from Michigan to ever become president. He said, quote, "Our values, our principles, and our determination to succeed as a free and democratic people will give us a torch to light the way," end of quote. We can only hope so. I'm Chuck Stokes. Thanks for joining us these last 9 weeks.